in Nauvoo, in my opinion, is when Joseph Smith hits the zenith of his prophetic powers. It's when he becomes and maximizes the most of his prophetic gifts. It's when we get some of our most revolutionary doctrines. In Nauvoo is where we get the concept of a heavenly mother being developed. It's where we get eternal marriage, where plural marriage is implemented. The Relief Society is organized. Joseph Smith delivers the King Follett sermon, and above all, he introduces temple ordinances and temple ceremonies and the presentation of the temple endowment before his death. That is a lot in a 4 to 5 year period of time in Nauvoo, formerly known as Commerce, Illinois. In the next few videos, we're going to touch on a number of these subjects, but in this video in particular, I want to focus in on some of the doctrines that Joseph Smith reveals in Nauvoo. We're going to look at some sections like sections 127, 128, 129, and section 130. We're going to focus in this video in particular on things like the development of baptisms for the dead, some of his teachings about eternity, and his grand, perhaps the best sermon of his life, known as the King Follett sermon. So I hope you're excited as I am and ready to go. Let's jump right into it. I did this painting of Joseph Smith. As some of you know, I'm also an artist and like to depict things from the Restoration we typically don't see. This painting I titled After Liberty. It's based off of a description by Dimmock Huntington, who, when Joseph Smith escaped from Liberty Jail, or was allowed to escape with the other prisoners after being held there, what the sheriff knew was unjustly, and Joseph showed up at Quincy, Illinois, where the saints had found refuge. Dimmock Huntington leaves this great description where he sees this man get off the boat at the dock, and he's wearing a blue coat and a black rim-sopped hat, and he looks haggard and pale, is what Dimmock Huntington says. He's wearing boots that have holes in them. And he looks closely at the man, and he says, "Joseph, is that you?" And Joseph tells him to be quiet so that he's not overly recognized. And one of the first things Joseph asks is, "Where's my family?" But he leaves this wonderful description. And I had to do a painting of it. This is my painting trying to use the description of Dimmock Huntington and a little bit of symbolism in it as well. You can see that I've put in some of the descriptors he used. In the background, there's a tree there that to me symbolizes maybe some of the dead, lost hopes that had just happened from Missouri. But right over the horizon, over Joseph Smith's left shoulder, I also put a little glimmer of hope, a little bit of yellow sunlight, that Joseph always was a hopeful person. He was an optimistic person. And Joseph was already looking forward to Nauvoo, trying to find a place to rebuild their dream, establish their Zion, gather the saints. Joseph might have been haggard and pale, but he was not defeated. He still was resolute and ready to move forward. And in my opinion, I think when Joseph comes out of Missouri, out of Liberty Jail, and into Nauvoo, he just sets his sight on, I'm going to do whatever God has asked me to do to the end of my life, even if it costs me my life, which Joseph seemed to sense was near. So how did we get the land of Nauvoo in Illinois? This is the first time, by the way, the church quits going west. We go from New York to Ohio, to Missouri, west, west, west. And then when we get driven from Missouri in 1838-39, the church flees back eastward, leaving Missouri and going back into Illinois. Well, Bishop Partridge had been in touch while Joseph was in prison with a man named Isaac Galland, who offered to sell the church some property in a place called Commerce, right off the Mississippi River. He sells the church land on both sides of the river. And by the way, the church buys more land on the other side of the river, which 10 bonus points in heaven if you know the name of that city that they were going to build. They call that city Zarahemla, which never really gets built. But on the eastern side of the river, on the bluff there, in particular where the temple is and on the flats below and above, we build this city that Joseph ends up calling Nauvoo, which he says means the beautiful. When Joseph heard that this land was offered, he wrote a letter to Isaac Galland in Liberty Jail and told us to hold the land in reserve for us and we will purchase it of you, is what Joseph says. And which they did. They began to build up the city and organize it beginning in 1839-40.